And greetings to you, music lovers, thrill seekers, conversationalists all across the fruited plain. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone for yet another excursion into broadcast excellence. I've had some of my friends say today, this is the first day that I would not want to have your job. I said, really, why? I wouldn't, I would, why? Because I couldn't say what I really think. I've had 4 or 5 people tell me this today. And I said, well, just stand by, let me show you how it's done. Telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882. And if you want to send an email, it's rushbo@eibnet.us. What's that? No. I'm telling you that Barack Obama invited Black Lives Matter to the White House and honored them after Ferguson and after Baltimore. You're not supposed to mention that. But there were 2 sides to this thing. I was talking to Mr. Snerdley today, and I have a serious question. I understand completely the need to condemn the Klan and these neo-Nazis and these white supremacists and these idiots. And I'm really interested in why these people are becoming this way, because I think there are answers that will tell us a lot. There are just too many young men with too much time on their hands, and too much ill influence is all over this country. I understand it. It ticks me off these people exist. It ticks me off that we have to deal with neo-Nazis and people fascinated with this stuff. And white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan. But let's remember something. They want to take down all these monuments. In fact, get this. Richmond, Virginia, a Confederate heritage organization has just asked the state of Virginia for permission to gather September 16th at their Robert E. Lee Monument in Richmond. After this weekend, after all of this, we have a Confederate group, heritage organization, that has asked for a permit to gather at the Robert E. Lee Monument. Now, what do you think is going on here? I mean, the point is that it's not just the neo-Nazis, and it's not just the white supremacists, and it's not just these groups, but there's a whole other range of similar hate groups on the left that are just as guilty and are just as invasive and if probably more violent. And I asked Snerdley today, could somebody explain to me why in the world only one side here is being condemned? And why, when somebody dares mention that there was more than one side here, that person gets condemned? Let's listen to the president's statement on this, because this is the fuel that started this media fire and everything else of condemnation aimed at President Trump. This is Saturday afternoon in Bedminster, New Jersey. We have 2 bites that represent the president's statement. Here's number 1.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. It's been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives.
So he did not single out the Nazis, and he did not single out the white supremacists. He mentioned, as you heard there, many sides. Both sides, many sides. Hatred, bigotry, violence on many sides. It's undeniably true. It's undeniably true that there is hatred and bigotry and violence sponsored on both sides. All you have to do is revisit recent history in college campuses, or go to Ferguson, Missouri, or go to Baltimore, Maryland. It's all over the place. And a lot of this, let's not forget this either. Remember at during the presidential campaign at Trump rallies, we have learned that a guy named Robert Kramer, who visited the Obama White House over 100 times, and the Oval Office some 45 to 50 times, This guy admitted to hiring militant protesters to infiltrate Trump rallies as Trump supporters and then start causing violence. He proudly admitted it. It was a Project Veritas video. And he admitted that he was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton. So we know this happens on both sides. It undeniably happens on both sides. We also know that most of this stuff is instigated primarily by one side. And yet, that side, I guess, is to never be mentioned. In order for Trump to have passed this test, he was only supposed to condemn one side in this dispute. And he didn't do that. Very obviously, Trump was supposed to condemn the white supremacists. He was supposed to condemn the Nazis and stop. But he didn't. Here's the second part of the statement.
We have to come together as Americans with love for our nation and true affection, really, and I say this so strongly, true affection for each other. Our country is doing very well in so many ways. We have so many incredible things happening in our country. So when I watch Charlottesville, to me it's very, very sad. Above all else, we must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first. We love our country. We love our God. We love our flag. We're proud of our country.
May as well not have mattered. Now, you know why? It's very obvious to me what they're after here. And to illustrate, I want to bring back a story that some of you might remember from my fertile memory. I believe it was the first term of George W. Bush, and there was a White House press conference, a presidential press conference, first that had been taken in a while, and a theme developed before the press conference began. The theme was the media was going to ask Bush to admit that he had made mistakes. Not specific mistakes, just admit that he had made mistakes. The media coverage of Bush up at that point was he's an idiot. A lot of things had gone wrong, the Iraq War, this kind of thing. And the press conference went on for 35 minutes, and every reporter who got a question led off, but will you admit you've made mistakes? They wanted Bush to admit that he was responsible for what the media said was going wrong. Same thing here. The media and the left want Donald Trump to condemn all of these groups, the white supremacists and the Nazis, because they want to tie him to them. They want to tie Trump to what is known as the alt-right, which I guess is made up of these neo-Nazis and the white supremacists and so forth. But there's a similar group on the left. They are violent, they are intimidating, and they are very violently active, and they instigate things. They travel. They are bought and paid for in many cases. They, I guess, are not to be mentioned. We don't mention them because I guess they're made up of minority groups, and as such, their actions are either valid or are to be understood. But the lunatics on the right are just that, and there's nothing about them to be. You know what Reuters did today? Reuters' style book refuses their reporters' permission to use the word terrorism in any story about militant Islam or a genuine terror attack anywhere in the world. At Reuters, it's forbidden. They called this action terrorism 5 times in a story. So they've been willing to broom their own style book, which, again, is illustrative of what is really happening here. Cheryl Gay Stolberg at the New York Times tweeted the following. A few wrap-it-up thoughts from Charlottesville. Number one, striking how many of the white nationalists were young people, almost entirely men. Her second tweet, the hard left seemed as hate-filled as the alt-right. I saw club-wielding Antifa beating white nationalists being led out of the park. So here's an acknowledgement from the media, from the New York Times, that there was an equal amount of hate from the left in this incident. And then this in the Washington Post by David Weigel, believe me, who is nowhere near the right side of the aisle. Headline, Fear of Violent Left Preceded Events in Charlottesville. I had to have 3 people read this to make sure that I wasn't missing something in this. On Saturday afternoon, shortly before her camera captured a car plowing through left-wing activists in Charlottesville, killing 1 and injuring more than a dozen others, Faith Goldie warned that the left was spinning out of control. Hundreds and hundreds of Antifa, weird BLM, Black Lives Matter, idiots dressed like clowns. This is okay as long as you're not the alt-right. The alt-right wasn't allowed to demonstrate any show of force. Then the activists began chanting Black Lives Matter in the background of the video. And then she observed, you start chanting Black Lives Matter, and all of a sudden the cops don't care. Where are the riot police now? Well, the riot police were told to stand down. Somebody had to tell the riot police to stand down. In New York City, NYPD officials said this would have never been allowed to happen in New York. The riot police would have never let these 2 groups get anywhere near each other. They would not have allowed an automobile to get anywhere near any of this. There would have been barricades, and the New York PD says we would. Now, hindsight, I know, is always 20/20, but the NYPD people are speaking in terms of policy. And when you had a volatile situation like this, they would have never let these 2 groups get together. But in Charlottesville, the police stood down. Why? A lot of this stuff, I say to you, doesn't make sense. I understand all of this fully, as I know you do too. But on the surface, it doesn't make sense. Who would order the cops to stand down, and why? This has become the latest story and the latest excitement that animates and energizes the Get Rid of Trump movement in the Washington establishment and in the media. And if you think that this issue is going to fade away after today, another thing coming. This is about violence between 2 hate groups with no association with Donald Trump or the Republican Party. But the media is doing everything it can to associate the Nazis and the skinheads and the white supremacists with not just Trump, but the Republican Party. That's why the Republican Party, everybody in it, ran to the microphones and condemned it, did everything, because they know that if they don't go out and say that, the drive-bys and everybody else to the left are going to do everything they can to associate this with the Republican Party, when the fact remains that on the line of ideological trace, both of these groups are extreme leftists. The Nazis were not on the right of anything, and white supremacists are not on the right of anything. All of these groups are to the left of center. But the Republican Party knows that they had to come out and condemn this or else, which takes me back to Trump's statement. Now, somebody besides Trump had input in this statement. And you have to ask yourself, was there nobody in the White House comms office who knew that the statement that Trump made was going to cause this? Is there nobody who knew this? Somebody in that comms office had to know that a statement like this was going to provide fodder for exactly what is happening now. What do you mean what I have done to? Name the names. If you're going to go out, instead of condemning all sides, both sides, say it. Condemn the Nazis, condemn the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, and then condemn Black Lives Matter. Condemn all of them. They're all reactionary fringe groups on the left. The problem is, folks, that the left-wing fringe groups are being portrayed as mainstream. Not just this weekend, but from their outset. Left-wing protest groups are portrayed as mainstream, and in fact they're portrayed as justified because their grievances date back to the founding of the country. And their outrage is understandable. We must take every step we can to understand it. Okay, get somebody in the comms office who understands how to write and give a statement here that is going to limit this kind of reaction, although I think they would have found a way to come at Trump no matter what he had said. Let's say he had done my idea, say identify as the neo-Nazis and identifies the white supremacists by using those terms, but then identifies the left-wing groups with name too. He would still come under attack for being judgmental against the left-wing groups. I understand that. It pains me to see all this. It just pains me because I understand exactly what's behind all of this. Charlottesville is Ferguson. Charlottesville is Baltimore. It's going to be used as an excuse for the media to smear their political enemies. Trump first, conservatives second, Republicans third. But this incident has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with the Republican Party, and it has nothing to do with conservatism. What it does have to do with is a minority of sick people drawn to sick fringe groups. White supremacists and the Nazis and the extremist far-left Antifa deserve each other. They're bound by hate. They're both bound by racism, yet pretend they have nothing in common. By all means, investigate what happened in Charlottesville. Who were the organizers? Who funded them? Nothing would surprise me with the Antifa. I want to know. I want an in-depth investigation of just what happened and who these people are, because we already know how these people operated during the Republican primaries at Trump rallies. We know they were bought and paid for, and they were trained by a guy named Robert Kramer, who is married to a Democrat member of Congress. George Soros is in the mix as well, but you're not supposed to say any of this today. No, you can't say this today. Today is reserved for 100% condemnation of Trump and his association with these right-wing, so-called right-wing fringe groups. Let me take a quick time out. We'll be right back after this.